Hello there, this is Sarah Powell, Director of Emergency Management at Temple University. And today I'm joined by Mark Dene, who's the Senior Director for Student and Employee Health Services at Temple. We're going to be doing an overview for you about the planning effort that is involved in returning to campus operations. So first of all, I want to really share our goals, which is to, number one, safeguard the health and safety of everyone in our community. The second is that we want to focus on how we safeguard our institution of Temple University. And finally, how do we continue to provide for the mission critical educational practices that we are here to do and provide. The return team is made up of over 150 people at the end of the day. And we have a number of teams that are focused on specific areas of mission continuity, including academic instruction, operations, student life, business continuity, and research. These teams all report up to a team of leads who report to the steering committee. And the steering committee is actually the same group of people who formed the early incident management team for the very beginning of this year in January, when we started to look at the spread of the global pandemic and what became the global pandemic. Vice President Bill Bergman leads our effort and provides a bridge to the cabinet and the Office of the President. So the key triggers that I really want to make sure to emphasize for all of you is that everything that we do is going to be determined by the public health situation at the time, as well as government guidelines and mandates that we may receive. So the spread of COVID-19 in our local communities is of critical importance. And as that may change over time, that will continue to require us to adjust what we're doing accordingly. The load on the local healthcare system is a very important metric that we have to continue to track. And those new hospital admissions for COVID-19 can sometimes be a better indicator of community spread than even the new positive cases that are listed in the community, because a lot of that has to do with the availability of COVID-19 acute disease testing. Of course, availability and the efficacy of serological testing for antibodies can also provide us additional information and assistance, but that science is not quite there yet. We also are tracking the availability of effective antivirals for COVID-19. So the government guidance and mandates provides us with a lot of instruction really on what we're able to do and not do. For example, right now in Southeast Pennsylvania, we're in a red phase, and we are not permitted to do any in-person instruction under a red phase, though we have been recently permitted to do some clinical work for our students in the medical school and other allied health professions. We are hoping in the next week or so to move into a yellow phase, which will give us more permission for some of our activity. And then hopefully we will enter into a green phase in short order. So I'm going to pass this to Mark Dene now to talk about our public health pillars.
Thanks, Eric. So you're going to hear throughout this presentation us talk about many different scenarios about returning back to campus. There's going to be 4 main themes that will be followed through no matter what scenario we find ourselves in. None of these should be a surprise to anyone. They've been things that have been in the news for the last several months as we've gone our way through this pandemic. The first of those is face coverings, wearing masks. Masks will be available to everyone, students, faculty, and staff. They'll be required to wear them when they're in public spaces and they can't follow social distancing. Also, social distancing, and you'll find this throughout the presentation, whether we're talking about academics, talking about building safety, bringing employees back, trying to really lower the number of people on campus, lower the density on campus so that we continue following social distancing everywhere we go. Hand hygiene is critical, being able to wash your hands or use hand sanitizer anytime that you touch a surface, and never touching your face without washing your hands. We'll be installing hand sanitizer in all the building lobbies and in all the floors of different buildings. Then finally, health monitoring. Everyone needs to make sure that they're following what their body's telling them. Are they having any of the symptoms of COVID-19? If they are feeling sick, we want people to stay home. Don't go to class, don't come to work. We really need to reduce the possibility of infecting any other people. One of these strategies alone isn't enough. We really need to use all 4 of these public health pillars and precautions as a layered approach. And when used in conjunction, we believe we can do things very safely and really reduce the risk throughout campus. There's additional things we're going to be doing on campus. The first of those is COVID-19 testing. The situation with testing is changing constantly with more and more testing and supplies becoming available. Our plan is going to involve Temple University Health System, the Philadelphia Public Health Department, the local partners, whether it's urgent care, some of the drugstores, as well as doing testing on site on campus within Temple Student and Employee Health. We really feel like we'll be able to do a robust amount of testing so that we can identify any potential spikes in cases and then be able to isolate and quarantine them quickly so that we can reduce the spread of any possible disease. A couple other ways that we do that, contact tracing. We're going to be developing our own internal contact tracing unit at Temple, only for Temple employees, faculty, staff, students, so that anybody who tests positive on our campus, we're going to have our own group of contact tracers to be able to identify anybody that they've come in close contact with so that we can put them into quarantine and make sure that they don't infect any other people. This is going to be a very robust system and a robust unit. We're going to be working in conjunction with the Philadelphia Public Health Department and utilizing all the technology that we possibly can to make this as safe an environment as we possibly can. Serological testing, as Sarah mentioned, antibody testing, the science isn't quite there yet, but again, we're hoping to learn a lot more in the next month or two before we start coming back to campus in large numbers in August and September. So hopefully the situation with antibody testing will be better by then. Isolation and quarantine. Talked about that with the contact tracing. We're going to have a number of rooms set aside in housing so that we can isolate any students from the residence halls that become sick. We'll be able to isolate them so that they reduce the number of people they can potentially infect. Building safety, we'll talk about some more specifics about that in a second. Travel restrictions, we're still in a restricted travel situation, and we will be for the foreseeable future, as well as occupancy restrictions. That goes in line with the social distancing, really reducing the density on campus so that we can follow social distancing in the safest way we possibly can. So talking a little bit more about some of the building safety protocols we'll be doing. I mentioned that we're going to be installing hand sanitizer in all of the lobbies and in all the floors of each building. Those efforts are already underway. Social distancing barriers, such as sneeze guards, that'll be at all the front-facing security desks and other registration desks that people are constantly coming towards. Various touchless features with water fountains, disabling certain features that are high-touch areas, installing floor decals and other signage to help remind people to wear masks, stay 6 feet apart, and really all of these health pillars that we're trying to reinforce with everyone. There's going to be signage in all of the buildings to that effect. Additionally, the ventilation and making sure that our ventilation practices in all our buildings are as efficient as they possibly can be so that we're protecting everybody on campus to the greatest of our ability. In addition to that, Sarah's going to talk about a few things on the academic front and talk a little bit more about the phases that we're going into for moving back to campus.
So once again, thank you so much, Mark. I want to just drive home here that the key to our success is going to be this combination of precautions. So using all of these different measures to layer upon each other so that we can enhance our risk mitigation as much as we possibly can. We've already really started with phase 1, and essential employees have come back to campus. We have about 250 essential employees on campus today in our facilities maintenance and housekeeping areas. And then we're in the process right now of very carefully and with much consideration expanding essential research. So the Office of the Vice President for Research has really been doing a fantastic job of very, very carefully bringing researchers back so that we can continue our essential grant funded work. Phase 3 is really the start of summer 2. So the summer 2 session is going to enable us to undertake what we think of as a pilot. We have 25 classes, almost all of which, 24 of which are in allied health professions like physical or occupational therapy. And we are permitted by the state to do in-person instruction for those allied health programs. So we will be able to look at a very limited number of buildings, 5 buildings, with these 25 classes and minimal in-person instruction there to really make sure that we layer all of these risk mitigation techniques one upon the other, and that we really can learn about the best way to do each one. How do we make sure that there's adequate flow of people in the way that's the safest for all of our members of our community? Phase 4 is when students begin to really return to off-campus housing and to repopulate the surrounding neighborhoods. August 1 is the start of most of those leases. And we have that as a target date for our on-campus COVID-19 testing site. Finally, phase 5 is the beginning of our fall semester. And of course, as I mentioned before, we will be guided by what we're permitted to do by our governor in all of our locations. This is also true of international locations that will also be guided by the governments in those places. So one approach to strategy is to engage in the process of creating scenarios. And scenarios enable us to anchor our planning and really deeply consider all the different variables we could face. You don't want to have too many scenarios or you get quickly overwhelmed. But these 4 scenarios are really in line with what we expect to see, not just now and not just in fall, but possibly over the next 18 months or until that there is an effective vaccine or when there's an effective vaccine. We also are lining them up now with what we think the government guidelines may or may not be as connected with those different scenarios. So as you can see on the right-hand side here, we're really in a comprehensive remote right now. And what we want to make sure in the future is that if we have to return to a comprehensive remote with almost all or nearly every bit of our instruction online, we have it done in a very intentional and planned way, that we're utilizing the best pedagogical practices for instructional design, and we're really making sure that the quality of that instruction is as high as possible. We do expect to be entering into an essentials only phase, and that kind of scenario would say that yes, we may still have restrictions in terms of the number of people in a space, but we may at least be able to have the in-person classes that have to be conducted in person. For example, laboratory science, studio art, theater, music, the kinds of things that really can't be done quite as well remotely as we would like. We may have takeout meals only, and it's questionable right now whether in an essentials only we would be able to do any sports or recreation indoors. However, under the governor's guidelines, we would expect to be able to see individual activity outside where there's increased ventilation. Restricted semester would be an expansion of that, probably our most challenging scenario to plan for. And then finally, a reasonably normal would kind of accord at least with the governor's green phase. And we would hope that even though we can expect to see no mass gatherings of a large size until there's a COVID-19 vaccine, but we would still see face coverings, more in-person classes, and additional recreation and sports activity permitted. Scheduling around these kinds of scenarios is incredibly challenging. It's important to remember that there's actually 603 programs with over 5,500 course selections, and believe it or not, 195,000 individual course registrations to deal with. As you can see by the chart on the left, there's a red H that it sort of emerges from that grid. That's our scheduling grid for all of the courses. And you can see that most people prefer to take their courses between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which isn't very surprising. because of the sheer number of course selections that we have, it's very difficult to do a lot of change to that grid, but we will have to do some changes possibly in the future to make sure that we consider all of the different needs that we might have. Social distancing measures in classrooms is a particularly challenging issue. How do we keep 6 feet of space between students? And what kinds of classrooms can we even use in this kind of situation? So, for example, a classroom for 90 people may only fit actually 15 people. Or another classroom that typically fits 40 people, we might be able to use for groups of less than 10. And each one of those 10 people may need to stay 6 feet apart. So how do we consider all of the availability in terms of rooms and space, as well as maybe creative ways to use spaces that we aren't able to use for classroom instruction? You know, could there be a small 3-person recitation group that meets in a classroom typically for 40 when we're not able to use that as an instruction space in a kind of classical sense? Cleaning and disinfection plays into this situation as well, and other technological solutions will always be part of the equation as well. What can we do on Canvas? What can we do on Zoom to enhance the learning experience? How do we mitigate our risk in the most considerate ways? So the academic teams are listed on the left here: teaching and learning, people who are focused on placements and practicums, things like student teaching. We have folks devoted to considering the issues of enrollment, international students and international travel risk, as well as our clinical practices or programs that have students working in clinical rotations. So we know that experiential learning is a critical part of education, and we have to think about how do we prioritize the kinds of things that must be done in person and make sure that we still maintain that health and safety barometer that we need to. Student life integrates extremely closely with the academic life. In fact, they're really intertwined, because many of what students have shared with us is that meaningful connected experience is really what they gain the most from their college experience and especially their undergraduate time. We need to make sure that we continue the programs, services, and activities that the students need while still maintaining health and safety. And that includes things like disability resources, Titleman counseling, all kinds of different student-facing services. Our Dean of Students, Stephanie Ives, heads up the student life team, and she's very focused also on how do we promote safe and compliant student behavior, which is going to be such an important and vital aspect of everything we do. Mark's going to share what we're doing in terms of housing now.
So with our housing, some of the same themes we've been talking about throughout the presentation will follow suit. Occupancy density is one of the key factors. Fortunately, Temple, most of our residence halls have apartment or suite style rooms. We only have 2 residence halls that have communal bathrooms. In consultation with the CDC, as well as other organizations, the communal bathrooms are really the area they've suggested and recommended that places lower the density to lower the use of those communal bathrooms. So in our residence halls in Johnson and Hardwick, we'll be moving towards single room only in those 2 rooms in order to lower the density and to maintain things as safe as possible. We're also going to be having a bank of rooms so that we can isolate any students that get sick. So if they're in the residence halls and they get sick, we'll be able to move them into a different location to avoid them getting anybody close to them or their roommates sick. This will be done in conjunction with our contact tracing unit to make sure that we're making sure everybody is safe as they possibly can. There's also going to be a procedure for any vulnerable population to identify the risk that they have and make sure that they can get single room housing as well. So anybody that is in a high risk category, we want to make sure that we're protecting them, the most vulnerable that we possibly can. Grab and go dining, as of right now, that is the plan to have grab and go dining available through Aramark. These are all the different risk mitigation strategies that we're going to be using within housing. large education component as well, just to make sure that we're really hammering home the 4 pillars of health, to make sure everybody's following all of those pillars throughout their experience in housing. Room selection has been live since April 1st, so there are some challenges with some people that are already currently in double rooms. So we're going to be working through that process throughout the summer to make sure that everybody has the appropriate housing that they need. I'll talk a little bit about our workforce and some of the things that we've learned with the people, the essential employees that have been on campus. As Sarah mentioned earlier, we've had about 250 on campus. We're bringing on additional essential employees. And then once Philadelphia does move into the yellow phase, we're planning on bringing more employees onto campus. But we need to make sure that we're doing this in a very safe, regimented manner with certain criteria being met so that we can make sure everyone is as safe as possible when they come back. There's still going to continue to be a combination of working in person and working remotely. Those who are working remotely and working effectively may continue to do so. Those who really need to be on campus and they can perform their jobs better on campus, they may be coming onto campus. There are some folks that are essential that have to be here, have to be on campus. There's going to be a combination of some, maybe they're on campus one day, but they're remote another day. It's really being flexible, making sure that we lower the density in our offices, in our buildings, so that we can follow the 6 feet of social distancing and really make sure that we can continue to perform the high quality work that everybody does here at Temple. It's going to be different. Coming back to Temple in the fall is going to look different. It's going to be evolving and it's going to be changing, but we believe that we can bring folks back to campus and do so in a very safe and responsible manner.
One of the things that we have long recognized with anything in public health is that a robust social marketing campaign often has to accompany a desire to change behavior. And so we're really working hard on developing a university-wide campaign that's focused on communication and education, more importantly, to help foster compliance with our public health measures and emphasize our communal responsibility to one another. When we wear a face covering, we're doing it not for ourselves and our own protection, but for the protection of others from us, especially if we have the potential to be asymptomatic and not even be aware that we are sick. So this emphasis on our personal responsibility and a responsibility to the larger Temple community is a very, very important part of what we're doing and how we hope to fight COVID-19 together while continuing to achieve our goals in education, research, work, and our service to this community. I really believe, and Mark really believes, and the whole planning team believes, we are capable of doing this, and we look forward to seeing at least a portion of our community on campus this fall, and certainly into the future months. Thank you so much, and I hope that we are able to talk again soon.